Hi English 111 students. I wanted to take just a few minutes to walk through some of the research techniques that you can use here in Module 5. So I'm going to start by logging in. And when I get to the MySCC homepage, instead of clicking on one of my links down here in the Launchpad, I'm going to go up to the top and click Library. And this gives you access to everything that is physically in our library. So if you wanted to check something out or place it on hold so you can come pick it up, you could do that. But you also have access to a huge number of online databases and online ebooks and videos and all kinds of sources to help you with your research in this class and in others. So take a look at this center part of the screen. We've got these tabs across the top that are from us, our school. So we've got the library staff, your access to WCU's library if you're interested in that. You can look at test preparation if you are in like one of our health sciences programs and you have to take the TEAS test or something like that. These tabs along the bottom are tabs connected to the online resources. They're all connected in this category of OneSearch, but you can choose to look for sources in different databases. If you have searched through our online sources through NC Live, you have probably seen some of the databases that we have, the ProQuest databases, EBSCO databases, that sort of thing. So I'll show you some different techniques that you can use. I'm going to start just by using this OneSearch box. And let's see, I'll just search for something that I've been talking about in British literature a little bit. So we're in the medieval period at the moment. And we've been talking about swords and how important they are in the medieval period and especially in medieval literature. So if I search for the terms medieval swords, you'll notice I get all kinds of different types of sources. So this little image tells you what type of source this is. This is an academic scholarly journal. This is either an encyclopedia or a dictionary, and you can see here it's from this encyclopedia. This is a newspaper, so the Calgary Sun, the New York Times. So my first thing that I want to think about as I'm doing research is what context am I doing research in? If I'm doing it for an academic class, then I want to make sure that all of these sources that appear on my screen are also academic. So let me go back to that definition of a scholarly source. A scholarly source is something that has been written by a professional in that field for other professionals in that field. So that automatically discards things like encyclopedias. Encyclopedia entries might be written by experts in that particular field, they might not. And encyclopedias certainly are not written for experts in the field. They are written for a very general audience. That automatically makes this not scholarly. The same thing is true of newspapers. It may be fantastic information, it may be perfectly fine as far as factual information goes, like the encyclopedia, but newspapers are not written by professionals in medieval studies, and they certainly are not written for professionals in the medieval world. So this also means they are not scholarly. Again, they could have fantastic information in them, but I'm talking about scholarly sources as a special kind of source. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top, and on the left I can narrow my search. So the first thing I want to do is select full text. I want to make sure that I have access to the full text of anything that I select from my search results. So that's the first filter that we're going to wait for, and sometimes this does take a little bit. Then I'm going to select scholarly journals. That's going to get rid of things like the encyclopedias, websites, newspapers, etc. You can also see the number of results is going down if you're paying attention to that at all. I could take it even a step further and select peer reviewed. That's another layer of scholarly source. Not all scholarly journals are peer reviewed, but all peer reviewed journals are scholarly. So let's take it one more step, see what happens. That was 12,000 results. I haven't done this search. I have no idea what's going to happen. All right, takes it down to 11,000. Of course, I'm not going to read all 11,000. So I'm going to look through some of these titles. This is the journal title. This is the article title. These are the authors. So I've got some interesting things here about the actual swords themselves that have been found and are being studied. Here's a literary reference to medieval swords and the way Tolkien uses swords. Tolkien was a Anglo-Saxon scholar, so of course he is interested in medieval things and was influenced by them. A short note on a newly acquired medieval sword for a child. That is interesting. There's the Tolkien one again. Swords in medieval China. There's the Tolkien one again. So this means that they're finding this article in all kinds of databases. So they're going to list it every time they find it in a database. Swords in medieval Egypt. Swords in medieval Muslim law. That's interesting. Medieval Europe. Northumbria, that's the UK. Sword and Fire, medieval warfare. So I've got lots of options here. Now, if none of these is exactly what I'm looking for, I can begin to add terms. And I can add terms using all caps and, which tells the search engine that is running this search to make sure that these terms and whatever comes after the and are found somewhere in that article. So if I do medieval swords and Beowulf, I have no idea what might happen here. And sometimes it takes a little bit, just wait, it's all right. All right, so we've narrowed down to 500 results. 3 notes on swords and Beowulf. The sword Hrunting, that's a very important sword, by the way, in Beowulf. Let's see, the monsters, the Swedish wars, which are mentioned quite a bit in Beowulf. Identifying the heroes of Beowulf. Significance of monsters. Here we are back to the swords. So I've got a couple of sources there that may be useful to me if I were doing research on the swords in Beowulf. So these sorts of techniques, so first of all, playing around with your search terms, and then second of all, making sure you narrow your searches. Those are going to be key to helping you find the sources that are most relevant or most applicable in an academic environment. Now, if you're an instructor in another class or you're in a place where you're doing research that doesn't have to be academic, then you can choose those sources that are newspapers and websites, that sort of thing. Oftentimes, I will require a minimum number of academic sources, like say a minimum of 2, but then beyond that, if you want to add more, you can add whatever kind of source you want. So this gives you that kind of flexibility. Now, if I want to actually go look at one of these, so let's choose the sword Hrunting in Beowulf. I'm going to click full text online. And notice this was found in the database called ProQuest. One of the things that I'll want to do is, I could read the article here. I prefer to look at the PDF for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is what it looks like exactly in the journal if I were physically holding the journal in my hand. But then number two, this gives me page numbers. So that, here's page 1, page 2, so that if I quote from this or I use this in my research paper, I've got a page number that I can refer to because that's necessary in MLA research. The other thing I like about PDFs is I can save it. So I can go ahead and click the little download button. I can open it in Adobe Acrobat and just go ahead and save it to my computer, and that way I never have to come back and find it again. Another useful technique to think about here, if I do decide to use this source will need to show up in my essay on the Works Cited page, so that list of all of my sources at the end of the essay. Most of the databases that we have access to will have a button that allows you to see how this source will be listed. So if I click Cite, notice this is APA. That's not right for this class. For other classes, you might be asked to use APA. I want MLA, so you're going to have to scroll through. These are all research styles. There are many of them. So we're using the most recent MLA. And this is correct MLA. Now I could use my handbook to double check this. This is an article in a database, but this is correct. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight it, copy, paste it into my essay. That way I have this ready and on my Works Cited page. Now I'm ready to use this source in my essay. So as you're doing your research and you're playing around with these articles for the discussion boards here in Module 5, be sure to click around. Play around with what you have access to through this library tab in MySCC. I really like those ProQuest databases, so sometimes I'll just skip this and I'll go instead to the A to Z database list. Whoops, this one, the A to Z database list. And go to the P's and search the ProQuest. The central one is the key ProQuest database. And I can enter in Swords, Beowulf, and before I click search, full text, peer reviewed. There, I've already limited my search results. So there's that Three Swords and Beowulf that I was just looking at. Sword fronting, swords and signs. So now I'm getting a few extra sources that I didn't get before, and that's good. So I've given myself some options for doing my research. So feel free to click around. This library tab is something that's going to be useful to you, not just this class, but in all of your classes here at SCC where you're asked to do writing and research. You're not going to hurt it. So click around, see what we got, play around with ways to use search terms, and I look forward to seeing what you find.